The Biden administration's special envoy to Haiti, Daniel Foote, has resigned in protest of the inhumane treatment and large-scale expulsions of Haitian migrants. So now, the island nation of Haiti is still reeling from earthquakes as well as political upheaval, and the political assassination attempt on, the political assassination of Jovenel Moise, as well as gang violence, and of course, years of international intervention into their government. So now, according to the Associated Press, Daniel Foote was appointed to the position back in July following the assassination of Moise, and even before the migrant expulsions from the small Texas border town of Del Rio, which had at one point seen 14,000 people camped out there, many under bridges in terrible conditions. The career diplomat was known to be deeply frustrated with what he considered a lack of urgency in Washington and a glacial pace of efforts to improve conditions in Haiti. That is not surprising. Let me just be honest. The United States is pretty awful when it comes to Haiti and other small island nations, nations that are, home to minorities. Our government, by the way, does not even care about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is literally part of the United States. The Puerto Ricans are American citizens, and still we don't care about them. It's horrible. And the reason, of course, is that they're brown. Now, Haitians are black. And, of course, as one of my friends who's Haitian, she kind of explained that there are the lighter-skinned Haitians that are at the upper crusts of society, and the darker-skinned Haitians who happen to be the ones that are poor. And so understand that there is that social stratification in that country as well. But here in America, we see somebody that's black, the government does, and says, oh, hell no. No, hell no. So, of course, the government here does absolutely the bare minimum to actually help those nations. Now, in this case, the bare minimum would be allowing people from that country to seek asylum. Foote wrote that Secretary of State Antony Blinken said so Foote had written Secretary of State Antony Blinken and said that he was stepping down immediately with, quote, deep disappointment and apologies to those seeking crucial changes. Quote, I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants to Haiti, a country where American officials are confined to secure compounds because of the danger posed by armed gangs to daily life. There's, of course, one of the major armed gangs is run by a guy named Jimmy Barbecue. And so I don't really want to know how he got that name. I can't imagine it would be good at all. And so that's one of the gang leaders. And there are, again, numerous gangs there that are vying for control. It really is a pretty dangerous place. So now, he wrote that our policy approach to Haiti remains deeply flawed, and my policy recommendations have been ignored and dismissed when not edited to project a narrative very different from my own. He also noted, very importantly, that the United States continues to and should stop interfering in the political process in Haiti by, of course, backing other corrupt regimes. He said this, quote, what our Haitian friends really want and need is the opportunity to chart their own course without international puppeteering and favored candidates, but with genuine support for that course. I do not believe that Haiti can enjoy stability until her citizens have the dignity of truly choosing their own leaders fairly and acceptably. Last week, the U.S. and other embassies in Port-au-Prince issued another public statement of support for the unelected de facto prime minister, Dr. Ariel Henry. The hubris that makes us believe we should pick the winner, again, is impressive. This cycle of international political interventions in Haiti has consistently produced catastrophic results. This is a former, official special envoy in the Biden administration. That is incredibly strong. Incredibly strong. And a very correct statement as well. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for calling out this administration very publicly, in a public way. Because guess what? It is getting attention. And that's the whole point. His policy positions were being ignored by this administration. And this again, and unfortunately, you're not going to see much of this on mainstream media, or at least much of the reason that he is resigning in the first place. What you're going to end up seeing is a defense of the Biden administration saying, oh, what are you doing? What are you talking about? We're doing the best that we can do. Oh, no, of course, he is just a quitter. And that's it. I can't believe that he would just duck out in the middle of the job. Oh, wow. No, that's not the issue. So now the State Department, as I mentioned, released a response. Here's what he said. This is Ned Price, who's the spokesman for the State Department. Quote, "This is a challenging moment that requires leadership. It is unfortunate that instead of participating in a solutions-oriented policy process, Special Envoy Foote has both resigned and mischaracterized the circumstances of his resignation." He added that the role of the president's advisors is to provide him with the best possible advice. No ideas are ignored, but not all ideas are good ideas. So, look, I think you've all seen by now the image of the mounted ICE officers essentially whipping or using their lassos and horses to corral Haitian migrants. Do you think that's a good government response to the Haitian migrant crisis? Do you believe that? Does that look like a good idea? Can you look at that photo and think, nailed it, we got it, oh, we're doing great? No, it looked like a colorized picture of pre-Civil War in the United States. But they weren't using whips. They were just using lassos. It's different. Whips, lassos, doesn't really matter. The intention is, of course, the same, to intimidate people, which the administration, by the way, is sending back in record time. They're not even allowing these people enough time to plead their case for asylum. Seeking asylum, of course, is 100% legal in this country. It's your right under international law. And the Biden administration is breaking that law. Just like when they continued using Trump's Title 42 deportation law. Now, Representative Barbara Lee pulled that out and said that we should halt deportations of Haitian migrants, being, of course, on the right side of history. Kind of Barbara Lee's thing, which I love. She said, "We know the administration heard us, and in fact, they understand these issues very well." Well, then what's the problem? What's the problem with the Biden administration? Oh, right, of course, racism. And not just in the Biden administration, but every administration when you're dealing with people from Haiti or just black migrants in general. They are being mistreated. And again, I talk about how migrants from Central America are being mistreated. But black migrants actually get treated worse. The only difference here is you have an example of Haitians versus Cubans, right? So now, Cubans, brown, okay. Now in Miami, Haitian Americans are saying that they feel especially marginalized compared to Cuban Americans, who for generations have actually had a faster path to American residency. Haitian Americans say that disparate treatment has allowed Cuban Americans in South Florida to more quickly accumulate wealth and political power. In the 70s and 80s, there were both Cubans and Haitians arriving in Florida at the same time by boat, and they were both treated very differently, said Muzaffar Chisti, director of the Migration Policy Institute's office at New York University School of Law. Haitians were denied asylum, while Cubans were granted green cards. The fact Cubans were not black made it stark. True. Now, here's another point on that, a political point. Cubans happen to be, I think, as we know, at least Cubans in South Florida, more likely to vote for Republicans. I mean, the Republican, Cuban vote in Florida for Republicans is actually incredibly high. Now, there's a belief that Haitians are more likely to vote for Democrats. And so that might have something to do with allowing more Cubans into Florida than Haitians. And yet, what's interesting here is we're seeing a Democratic administration acting no different than a Republican administration on this particular issue. That is very interesting. In fact, the Washington Post notes that under Biden, expulsion flights to Haiti had begun on Sunday, and there were 10 by the end of Tuesday, according to Haitian officials. U.S. officials say that they're ramping up to 7 flights a day, which would make it one of the swiftest, large-scale expulsions from the U.S. in decades. The fastest. They can't get these people out there fast enough. Under a Democrat, by the way. Gross and racist. In fact, one top official said this about Foot's resignation. This is a Haitian official. He said, "This is the first time we see a U.S. diplomat who has decided to go against the will of the U.S. government." This is Matthias Pierre, Haiti's election minister, told the Associated Press. "We salute that." Pierre also criticized Haiti's elite, remember, as I mentioned, the lighter-skinned elite, saying that they have turned a blind eye because migration fuels the economy. He noted that 35% of Haiti's gross domestic product is remittances from the United States. The diaspora, much of it in the U.S., sending roughly $3.8 billion back to the island a year. Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry has barely discussed the expulsions in public, saying that only his government is worried about conditions that migrants face on the U.S. border and that it will help those sent back to Haiti. Pierre was far more critical of the U.S., saying, quote, while they're receiving thousands of Afghan people, they're rejecting Haitians while Haiti is in the middle of a crisis with the earthquake, a crisis with the assassination of the president, and a poverty crisis that is clearly one of the major issues why people are leaving. Damien Merlo, a Republican strategist who has worked for years on Haiti policy, now a registered lobbyist for that country's government, said this, quote, when someone who is tasked with Haiti policy at the highest level resigns because recommendations are ignored and dismissed, it's not only troubling, but shows you this administration does not tolerate anyone who won't go along with their distorted view of the facts. Dan Foote is a world-class diplomat who refused to be told what to do. I wish more Foreign Service officers had his courage to stand up and call out their bosses. 100%. Look, I don't agree with Republicans often. Let's be fair about that, especially lobbyists. I know, right? But in this case, he's right. Biden's Haiti policy is incredibly problematic, and I would say also racist and imperialist as well. We're over there basically using our influence to try to choose leaders for the Haitian people. And we've been doing that for a very, very long time. And we're not even letting people have a chance to gain asylum in this country, which is their right by law. What we need to do is to have people actually have their chance to request asylum. And not only that, but to help Haiti recover while also staying out of their internal policy matters. Staying out of their elections. We make a big deal here about, oh my God, people are trying to influence and interfere in our elections. I mean, that was a whole big deal. First, Democrats, with Russia, and now Republicans, oh, China, China, China. Meanwhile, we are literally interfering in Haiti, in their political processes, and supporting corrupt leaders. Total hypocrisy. Total hypocrisy. You say you believe in democracy. Well, if you do actually believe that, then why not actually let them have democracy? And if you don't, well, you're a hypocrite. And your words mean absolutely nothing. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.